Hi, in this video I'm going to introduce you to the Primitive Box plugin by Erizos. And I'm going to talk a bit about the features and how it can benefit in your daily workflow. So inside Unreal, I'm just going to search for Primitive. I'm going to select the Primitive Box and drag it into my scene over here, into my level. So as you can see right now, and this is going to bring me right into the first great feature of the Primitive Box, and that's the pivot point. So right now when I drag it into the scene, the pivot point here, you can see that the box is actually beneath my surface over here. So what I can actually just go and do inside the primitive properties over here, I can change the position of the pivot point. So right now in the Z it's set to 0. So I'm going to move this up to 100. And you can now actually see, so if I change my camera view, you can see that the pivot point changes where it is rendered. So if I play with that again, you can see that it's changing the position of the pivot point, and therefore I can easily get the box to sit on my surface over there. So just another example of this now with my pivot point on Z set to 100. If I go ahead and scale up my box, you can actually see that it's scaling from that pivot point. So it doesn't go beneath my surface. So that's just, this little thing that really saves a lot of time and helps positioning the cube. So let's go ahead and set the scale over here to 2.5. And I'm going to go ahead and drag material onto my box. So here we just have an example material for UV mapping. So you can see that it's nicely mapped here onto the surfaces of our cube. Okay, which brings me on to the next feature, and that's the border radius. So right now we just have this very sharp cube, and I can go ahead and set the radius to a value, for example, something like 10. And there we go, we get this nice curve along the corners of the box. It's quite a sharp bevel. We can smoothen that out even more. So if I set the bevel to, say, for example, 20, you can still see here that it's pretty rigid on the corners. So if I just zoom in here, you can see that that's pretty rigid. So I can improve this by increasing the bevel segments. So if I set this to 10, for example, you can now see that we get this really nice curve along the sides of the cube there. So you can play with those values and get the results that you want. The last thing I do want to talk about the box primitive is that it has its own dimensions. So if I change, for example, the X over here to, say, for example, 200, it's going to stretch our box out. And that's pretty similar to what would happen if we'd change the scale over here. So if I change that, it's also stretching it out. The main differences, and this is a purely workflow tool. Some people like to set the actual size of their mesh and then scale it universally across other objects as well. So say, for example, you're working on some sort of environment and you know the size of your object, so you can actually set the actual size in the dimensions over here and then use the scaler to make it fit into your scene. Okay, so that's the Box Primitive plugin. Thanks for watching.